My husband thought I would spend our 10th anniversary crying into a glass of wine, mourning our failed marriage. Instead, I spent the day with 5 locksmiths changing every single lock on the 7 properties he treasured most. As the sun set on what should have been a milestone celebration, I watched from my car outside Giovanni's, the restaurant where he'd proposed, as he clinked champagne glasses with his secretary, while across town, his access to the empire we'd built together quietly vanished. The moment his keys stopped working wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming what I had unknowingly surrendered: my power, my self-worth, and my future. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never planned to be the woman who gets betrayed by her husband and his secretary. That kind of cliché seemed beneath us, beneath the life we'd carefully constructed in our upscale Seattle neighborhood. When I met Nathan during my final year, at business school, I was Alexandra Bennett, the top-ranked finance student with multiple job offers from prestigious firms across the country. My professors called me brilliant. My classmates both admired and feared my analytical mind. My future shimmered with promise, limited only by my ambition. Nathan appeared in my life during a charity auction where I was representing my student organization. He outbid everyone for a private dinner prepared by a celebrity chef, a dinner I was responsible for coordinating. His confidence bordered on arrogance, but he had the intelligence to back it up. As the founder of Bennett Properties, no relation to my surname, a coincidence we both found amusing at the time, he had transformed a small inheritance into a thriving real estate development company by the age of 30. "You're different from the other business students," he told me that night after the auction. "They're following a script. You're writing your own." In retrospect, I wonder if he identified that independence in me as something to be harnessed, rather than nurtured. At the time, though, his assessment felt like recognition, like finally being seen for who I truly was. Our courtship was a whirlwind of intellectual connection and shared ambition. We debated market trends over dinner, analyzed investment strategies during weekend hikes, and stayed up late discussing which neighborhoods in Seattle were poised for revitalization. When he proposed 6 months later, presenting both a diamond ring and a business proposition, it seemed like the perfect merger. "Together, we could build something extraordinary," he said, kneeling beside our table at Giovanni's, the restaurant that would later become the backdrop for his betrayal. Not just a marriage, but a legacy. I said yes to both: the marriage and the business partnership. Within a year, I had declined my job offers, instead pouring my skills into Bennett Properties. My financial acumen complemented Nathan's vision and relationship-building talents. We were unstoppable, expanding from residential developments to commercial properties, then to luxury vacation rentals across the Pacific Northwest. The first 5 years were everything I'd imagined success would be. We purchased our dream home in Madison Park, with panoramic views of Lake Washington. We acquired a waterfront cabin on Orcas Island, a ski lodge near Mount Baker, downtown commercial buildings, and several luxury rental properties. Each new acquisition felt like evidence of our perfect partnership. The subtle shift happened so gradually I barely noticed it. First came the suggestions that I focus on certain aspects of the business, specifically the behind-the-scenes financial structuring, while Nathan became the increasingly public face of Bennett Properties. Then came the gentle pressure to handle more of our social obligations, hosting dinner parties for investors, organizing charity events that boosted our public image, maintaining relationships with clients' spouses. "You're so much better at making people feel comfortable," Nathan would say, as if this were a critical business skill rather than a way to relegate me to a supporting role. By our 7th anniversary, I was essentially managing our social calendar, household affairs, and back-office operations, while Nathan claimed the spotlight, the client meetings, and the industry recognition. Articles about Nathan Bennett's Impressive portfolio. Barely mentioned the wife whose financial strategies had made many of those acquisitions possible. I told myself it didn't matter who received the public recognition as long as we were building our empire together. I convinced myself that my contributions were valued, even if they weren't visible. I ignored the growing imbalance in our partnership, both professional and personal. Then came Lauren Ellis. Nathan hired her as his executive assistant when our previous office manager retired. At 32, Lauren was 11 years younger than me, with degrees in communications and business administration from a state university. She was competent, organized, and unfailingly polite whenever we interacted. She was also strikingly attractive, though I wasn't threatened by this. Nathan and I had always had a solid foundation of mutual respect and shared goals. Physical attraction seemed secondary. To our intellectual connection, Lauren's been such an asset, Nathan mentioned frequently during our dinner conversations. She anticipates problems before they arise. She knows how to manage difficult clients. She's restructured the entire filing system. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, genuinely pleased that he had found an efficient assistant. Our business was growing. We both needed support staff we could trust. The first hint that something had changed came during a charity gala for the Seattle Children's Hospital. I was deep in conversation with a potential investor's wife when I glanced across the room and caught Nathan looking at Lauren. It wasn't the look itself that unsettled me. It was how quickly he masked it when he realized I'd noticed. A slight shift in expression, a deliberate turning away, a too casual resumption of his conversation with the city councilman beside him. That night, I dismissed the moment as imagination. 4 weeks later, I couldn't dismiss the pattern that had emerged. Late nights at the office, weekend emergencies that required his immediate attention, a growing emotional distance even when we were physically together, and an increasing number of events where Lauren's presence was deemed necessary. Still, I had no concrete evidence, just a growing unease and the quiet knowledge that the man who came home to me each night seemed less and less like the partner I had married. I told myself I was being paranoid. I reminded myself of the pressure Nathan was under with our newest development project. I rationalized the distance as a temporary phase in our otherwise solid marriage. Then came the text message that wasn't meant for me. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April, 3 weeks before our 10th anniversary. I was using Nathan's iPad to review some property documents he'd asked me to look over, a downtown building we were considering for our next investment. We often used each other's devices. There had never been secrets between us. When the message notification appeared at the top of the screen, I tapped it without thinking. Anniversary weekend confirmed. Reserved the presidential suite at Chatham Lodge. Told Alex I'd be at the Portland conference. Can't wait to celebrate properly this time. L. The world didn't stop. The floor didn't open up beneath me. Instead, a strange calm descended as pieces clicked into place. The Portland conference that Nathan had mentioned offhandedly, the increasing mentions of Lauren in his daily recounts, the growing emotional chasm in our marriage. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't temporary. It was betrayal, methodically executed by the person I had trusted most in the world. I closed the message, finished reviewing the property documents, and left the iPad exactly where I'd found it. Then I walked to our home office, closed the door, and allowed myself 15 minutes to feel everything: the shock, the hurt, the humiliation, and beneath it all, a simmering anger that surprised me with its intensity. When the 15 minutes ended, I dried my eyes, reapplied my makeup, and began to think like the financial strategist I had once been. If Nathan was planning to spend our anniversary weekend with Lauren, he had already emotionally checked out of our marriage. The question wasn't whether our relationship was over. It was what kind of ending I would write for myself. I called my old college roommate, Vanessa, now a high-powered divorce attorney in San Francisco. "Alex, it's been too long," she answered warmly. Tell me you're finally coming down for that girls' weekend we've been postponing for 3 years. Not exactly, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I need your professional advice, not your friendship margaritas. At least for the moment. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Vanessa and I had met in our freshman year economics class, remained roommates through college, and stood beside each other at our respective weddings. She knew me well enough to recognize when something was fundamentally wrong. "What's happened?" she asked, her tone shifting from casual to concerned. I laid out the facts without embellishment. The text message, the planned anniversary weekend, the gradual changes in our relationship, and most importantly, the complex intertwining of our personal and professional lives. Every property is in both our names, I explained. Tax advantages. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But I'm the one who structured all the purchases, organized the finances, made sure everything was properly documented. Nathan is the face, but I'm the foundation. And now you're worried he'll try to push you out of both the marriage and the business, Vanessa stated rather than asked. Wouldn't you be? I countered. The woman he's seeing is his executive assistant. She already has access to most of our business operations. Replacing me would be logistically simple. Vanessa was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear her analytical mind working through the implications. You need to talk to someone local, someone who knows Washington state laws inside and out. I'm thinking Rebecca Chen. We were at a conference together last month. She specializes in high-asset divorces with business complications. I don't want a divorce, I said automatically, then paused, surprised by my own response. Did I still want this marriage? Or was I just reacting to the idea of failure, of having to admit that our perfect partnership had been an illusion? Maybe not, Vanessa said gently. But you need to understand your options before you confront Nathan. Knowledge is leverage, Alex. You taught me that in Econ 101. She was right, of course. Whatever I decided to do next, I needed information about my legal standing, my financial options, and the potential consequences of various actions. I needed to approach this betrayal not as a heartbroken wife, but as the strategic businesswoman I had once been. The next morning, I met Rebecca Chen in her downtown Seattle office, having told Nathan I was attending a charity committee meeting. The irony of using the very excuses he'd normalized wasn't lost on me. Rebecca was sharply dressed and direct in her manner, assessing me with keen eyes as I explained my situation. Before we discuss legal strategies, she said after I finished, I need to ask, what do you want the outcome to be? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? The automatic answer, to save my marriage, felt hollow in light of Nathan's deliberate deception. The vindictive answer, to punish him by taking everything, didn't align with the person I wanted to be. I want what I've earned, I said finally. Recognition for my contributions, security for my future, and I hesitated, articulating the feeling that had been growing since I'd read that text message. I want to reclaim who I was before I became Mrs. Bennett. Rebecca nodded, seeming to understand the deeper meaning behind my words. Then let's start by documenting everything. Your contributions to the business, the property acquisitions, the financial structures you've created. We need a clear record of your role in building this empire. For the next week, I lived a double life. During the day, I maintained the facade of the content wife and business partner, attending meetings, managing our social obligations, and interacting with Nathan as if nothing had changed. At night, after he had gone to sleep or during the hours he was working late, I meticulously documented my contributions to Bennett Properties over the past decade. The process was both painful and enlightening. I uncovered patterns I hadn't noticed while living through them. how my name had gradually disappeared from business communications, how my ideas had been presented as Nathan's in meetings, how my financial models had become our strategy, and then simply Nathan's approach. I found emails where clients specifically praised my work, only to have Nathan redirect the credit in his response. The paper trail told a story of systematic erasure, not malicious perhaps, but effective nonetheless. I had been slowly written out of my own success story, relegated to a supporting character in Nathan's narrative of self-made achievement. 10 days after discovering the text message, I had my second meeting with Rebecca, presenting her with organized documentation of my role in building Bennett Properties. "This is impressive," she said, reviewing my files. "You've essentially built a case for yourself as an equal partner in every sense, despite the public perception." "Will it be enough?" I asked. Rebecca set down the folder and looked at me, directly. "In a traditional divorce proceeding, yes. This would strongly support an equal division of assets, possibly more given the evidence of your outsized contributions." I noted her careful phrasing. "But you're suggesting an alternative approach?" A hint of a smile crossed her face. "Litigation is lengthy, expensive, and public. Given what you've told me about valuing your privacy and professional reputation, I wonder if you might consider negotiation from a position of strength instead." "What kind of strength?" I asked, though I was beginning to see where she was heading. "The kind that comes from being prepared and taking strategic action before the other party realizes there's a problem." She leaned forward slightly. "You have joint access to all properties and accounts, correct?" I nodded, a plan beginning to form in my mind. "Yes, my name is on everything, for tax purposes." "Then before you confront Nathan about what you know, you might want to consider securing your position in ways he won't immediately detect, but will certainly feel when the time comes." By the time I left Rebecca's office that afternoon, I had the outline of a strategy that wasn't about revenge, but reclamation, of my contributions, my identity, and my future. It would require careful timing, precise execution, and the courage to finally put myself first after years of supporting Nathan's dreams at the expense of my own. The first phase began the next day when I contacted Jason Morris, head of security for several high-end commercial properties in Seattle, including 2 of our buildings. "Mrs. Bennett," he greeted me warmly. "What can I do for you today?" "I'm reviewing our security protocols across all properties," I explained. "Recent events have made me concerned about vulnerabilities in our current systems." It wasn't a lie. My husband's betrayal had indeed exposed vulnerabilities, just not the kind Jason assumed I meant. "I'd be happy to conduct a comprehensive assessment," he offered. "We could start with your primary residences and work our way through the commercial properties." "That would be perfect," I replied, already mentally mapping out the timeline. "Let's keep this between us for now. I'd like to surprise Nathan with the enhanced security measures once everything is in place." The second phase involved a series of discrete meetings with our property managers, banking representatives, and legal counsel, all under the guise of routine business reviews. In each conversation, I subtly established my authority and access independent of Nathan, ensuring that when the time came, I could act without impediment. The third phase was perhaps the most challenging, continuing to interact with Nathan as if everything were normal, even as I prepared to upend his carefully constructed world. Each morning, I kissed him goodbye. Each evening, I discussed business matters over dinner. Each night, I lay beside him planning my response to his betrayal. 3 days before our anniversary, Nathan came home with an apologetic expression I'd seen rehearsed too many times recently. "Alex, I'm so sorry, but that Portland conference we discussed? It's been scheduled for this weekend. I know it's our anniversary, but this connection could mean millions for the waterfront project." I watched him deliver the lie with practiced sincerity, noting the careful way he maintained eye contact, the precisely calibrated regret in his voice. Had he always been this transparent, or had I simply learned to recognize the performance? "That's disappointing," I said, matching his regretful tone. "But I understand how important the waterfront project is to us. We can celebrate when you get back." Relief washed over his features, followed by what appeared to be genuine affection. "You're amazing, you know that? Most wives would make this difficult." "I'm not most wives," I replied, the double meaning of my words lost on him. "No, you're certainly not," he agreed, kissing my forehead. "I'll make it up to you when I return, I promise." As he headed upstairs to pack for his fictional conference, I sent a text to Jason. "Ready to proceed with security upgrades this weekend as discussed." His response came immediately. "Teams confirmed for all 7 properties, beginning Friday, at 9 a.m. Everything was in place. While Nathan celebrated his secret anniversary weekend with Lauren, I would be executing the most significant business transaction of my career, the reclamation of my power, my identity, and my future. It wasn't about revenge, though I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction in the timing. It was about finally writing myself back into the story Nathan had gradually erased me from. On Friday morning, our actual anniversary, I kissed Nathan goodbye, with genuine feeling, not love for the man he had become, but gratitude for the clarity his betrayal had provided. As his car disappeared down our tree-lined street, I allowed myself one deep breath before picking up my phone. "Jason, it's Alexandra. Bennett, let's begin." Jason arrived exactly at 9 with 2 unmarked vans containing his security team. I had chosen him specifically for this operation, not just because of his expertise, but because he'd worked with us long enough to respect me independently of Nathan. Unlike many of our business associates who deferred automatically to my husband, Jason had always treated me as an equal decision-maker. "We'll start with the downtown office building," I told him as we reviewed the day's schedule in our kitchen. "Then the Lake Union commercial property, followed by the rental houses in Queen Anne and Ballard. Tomorrow we'll handle the Orcas Island cabin and Mount Baker Lodge. Sunday is reserved for our primary residence." Jason nodded, studying the timeline I'd prepared. "Comprehensive security upgrades at 7 properties in 3 days is ambitious, Mrs. Bennett." "Alexandra," I corrected him. "Or Alex. And yes, it's ambitious, but necessary." He didn't ask why the sudden urgency, why the need for all properties to be addressed in one weekend, or why my husband wasn't involved in these decisions. His discretion was another reason I'd chosen him for this particular job. "My team is divided into 3 units," he explained. "Each property will receive new electronic entry systems, rekeyed mechanical locks as backups, and updated security protocols that require new access credentials. And everything will be registered under my authorization only," I confirmed. Jason hesitated for just a moment. "As we discussed, though typically we would require both property owners to—" "My name is on every deed, Jason," I interrupted gently. "I have the legal right to determine access protocols. If Nathan wants changes after reviewing the new systems, he can certainly request them through me." Understanding passed between us. Jason might not know the details of my marital situation, but he was perceptive enough to recognize the significance of what I was doing. He gave a single professional nod. "Understood. Alexandra, we'll proceed according to your specifications." As Jason's team loaded equipment into the vans, I received a text from Nathan. "Arrived in Portland safely. Heading into first session. Miss you." The casual lie stung less than I expected. Perhaps because I now understood it wasn't personal. Nathan wasn't betraying me because I'd failed him somehow. He was betraying me because of who he was, who he had always been beneath the charming exterior. A man who took what he wanted and rewrote the narrative to justify his actions. I responded with an equally dishonest, "Miss you too. Good luck with the sessions," then tucked my phone away and joined Jason in the lead van. It was time to begin, reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The downtown office building housed Bennett Properties headquarters, 10,000 square feet of prime real estate with views of Elliott Bay. We'd purchased it 5 years ago when an economic downturn created a buyer's market. I'd identified the opportunity, structured the financing, and handled the negotiations while Nathan was focused on our Belltown development. Yet somehow, in the company folklore, it had become Nathan's brilliant acquisition. As we rode the elevator to the executive floor, Jason outlined the security changes. We're installing the Sentinel X7 system, top of the line, with multi-factor authentication requirements, facial recognition, PIN codes, and proximity cards working in conjunction. Who will have administrator privileges? I asked, though I already knew the answer based on our previous discussions. Only you, Jason confirmed. You'll be able to grant or revoke access remotely from any device. The system logs all entry attempts, successful or otherwise. The elevator doors opened to reveal Bennett Properties' glass-walled reception area. Megan, our weekend receptionist, looked up in surprise. Mrs. Bennett, we weren't expecting you today. Surprise security inspection, I explained smoothly. These gentlemen will be upgrading our systems. They may need access to all areas, including Nathan's office. Of course, Megan replied, though she glanced nervously at her computer. Should I inform Mr. Bennett? I think he's at that Portland conference, but I could email him. No need to disturb him, I said with a reassuring smile. He's fully aware of the upgrades. We've been planning this for weeks. Another lie, but a necessary one. I needed to maintain the illusion of business as usual until everything was in place. While Jason's team worked methodically through the office, installing new card readers and reprogramming electronic locks, I sat in my own office, smaller than Nathan's and tucked away from the main corridor, and began the next phase of my plan. Using the administrator access I still maintained to our company servers, I downloaded copies of critical files, financial records, property documentation, client contracts, and communication histories. These weren't for leverage or exposure. They were insurance. If Nathan realized what I'd done with the security systems and retaliated by locking me out of digital assets, I would still have what I needed to protect my interests. By noon, the office upgrades were complete. I watched as Jason demonstrated the new system, showing me how to add or remove users through the administrator portal on my laptop and smartphone. The changes are effective immediately, he explained. Old key cards and codes no longer work. Anyone previously authorized will need new credentials issued through this system. Including Nathan, I confirmed. Jason nodded. Including Mr. Bennett, yes. Would you like me to prepare his credentials now? I considered the question, weighing the immediate satisfaction of saying no against the strategic advantage of appearing reasonable. Prepare them, I decided. But I'll hold them until he returns from Portland. No sense having them sitting around unclaimed. Jason handed me a sealed envelope containing a new proximity card and temporary PIN for Nathan. I tucked it into my purse, knowing it would remain there until I decided how our inevitable confrontation would unfold. The Lake Union commercial property went equally smoothly. We'd purchased this mixed-use building 3 years ago, converting it into trendy office spaces on the upper floors with retail at street level. Nathan frequently brought potential clients here to impress them with his visionary redevelopment. The fact that I'd managed the entire conversion process, from architectural plans to tenant selection, had gradually disappeared from the narrative he presented. As Jason's team worked, I walked through the building, greeting tenants by name and inquiring about their businesses. These relationships had been my responsibility, the soft side of property management that Nathan considered less important than acquisition and development. Yet these connections had resulted in remarkable tenant retention rates and positive word of mouth that brought us high-quality occupants without expensive marketing efforts. Mrs. Bennett, what a lovely surprise, called Thomas from the artisanal coffee shop on the ground floor. I was just thinking about the holiday market we discussed. Is it still happening this December? Absolutely, I assured him. I'm finalizing the details next week, and please, call me Alexandra. Alexandra, then, he agreed with a warm smile. Will Mr. Bennett be joining the planning committee this year? The question was innocent, but it highlighted another aspect of our business dynamic. Nathan attended ribbon cuttings and grand openings, the glory moments, but rarely involved himself in the community-building events that created lasting value in our properties. Nathan's schedule is quite full, I replied diplomatically, but he's very supportive of the market concept. By mid-afternoon, the Lake Union property had been secured with the new system, and we moved on to the rental houses in Queen Anne and Ballard. These were among our first investments as a couple, modestly sized but well-located homes that generated reliable income. Nathan considered them small-scale compared to our later acquisitions, but I had insisted on keeping them in our portfolio. Their steady returns had helped us weather market fluctuations that impacted larger, flashier properties. At the Queen Anne house, we encountered our first complication. The tenant, a young tech executive who'd been there for nearly 2 years, arrived home midway through our upgrades. Mrs. Bennett, he said, clearly confused by the security team's presence. Is everything okay? I wasn't notified about any maintenance. Today. Everything's fine, Mr. Lawson, I assured him. We're implementing security upgrades across all our properties. I apologize for not giving advance notice. It was a last-minute decision after some concerns arose with another property. Oh, he replied, visibly relaxing. No problem at all. Will I need new keys? Yes, I confirmed, but we'll provide them before we leave today. The electronic entry pad will also have a new code, which I'll set up with you personally. He seemed satisfied with the explanation, even pleased by the security improvements. As we configured his new access credentials, I made a mental note to send a gift basket as thanks for his understanding, and to cement his loyalty to me rather than Nathan in case questions arose later. The Ballard rental proceeded without incident, and by early evening, 4 of our 7 properties had been secured under my exclusive control. Jason and I agreed to meet the following morning to take the ferry to Orcas Island, where our waterfront cabin would be the day's first target. As we parted ways, Jason hesitated. Alexandra, I don't mean to overstep, but these changes you're implementing, they're quite significant. They are, I agreed, not elaborating. If you need anything, any additional security measures, or advice, please don't hesitate to contact me directly, day or night. His tone conveyed understanding beyond professional courtesy. Jason had worked with enough high-net-worth clients to recognize the signs of a marital breakdown with significant assets at stake. Thank you, Jason, I said sincerely. I appreciate your discretion as much as your expertise. That night, alone, in our Madison Park home, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The day's activities had awakened something in me that had been dormant for years, the decisive business strategist I'd been before becoming Mrs. Nathan Bennett. Moving methodically through our properties, I'd reconnected with the woman who'd graduated at the top of her class, the woman whose financial acumen had impressed seasoned investors, the woman who knew her own worth. It was strangely liberating to act without seeking Nathan's approval, to make unilateral decisions about our shared assets, to reclaim my authority in spaces where I'd allowed myself to be diminished. Each newly secured lock represented not just protection of physical property, but the restoration of my agency. My phone buzzed with another text from Nathan. Dinner with Portland developers. Amazing connections being made. How's your evening? I considered not responding, but strategy prevailed over emotion. Until my security plan was completely implemented, maintaining normalcy served my interests. Quiet evening at home, I replied. Truthfully. Don't work too hard. Then, unable to resist, I added, How's the conference venue? The Chatham Lodge, right? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as Nathan composed his response. No, we're at the Riverside Grand. Standard corporate setting, nothing special. The lie slid so easily from his fingers to my screen. I wondered how long he'd been this comfortable with deception, how many business trips had actually been rendezvous with Lauren, or perhaps others before her. Had our entire marriage been a performance on his part, or had there been genuine connection that gradually eroded? It didn't matter now. Whatever we'd had was gone, replaced by calculated moves in what had become a high-stakes game. Nathan was playing by his own rules, unaware that I had rewritten the playbook entirely. Morning arrived with gray skies and light rain, typical Seattle weather that matched my determined mood. I dressed carefully in practical layers for the ferry ride and island visit, then checked my phone. No messages from Nathan, who was likely still asleep beside Lauren in the presidential suite he'd thought I wouldn't discover. Jason met me at the ferry terminal, his team already aboard with their equipment. During the 90-minute crossing to Orcas Island, we reviewed the day's objectives and timeline. The cabin's remote location presents some challenges, Jason noted, studying the property specifications. Cellular signal is unreliable, and power outages are common during storms. That's why we're installing both electronic and traditional locks, I reminded him. The electronic system gives us the audit trail and remote management, but the keyed deadbolts ensure security even if systems go down. Our waterfront cabin on Orcas Island held a special place in my heart. We'd purchased it during our 3rd year of marriage, when Bennett Properties was beginning to show significant profits. Unlike our other acquisitions, this one hadn't been primarily about investment value or strategic positioning. It had been about creating a personal sanctuary, a place to disconnect from business pressures and reconnect with each other. At least, that had been my vision. Over time, Nathan had gradually transformed our private retreat into another business asset, hosting potential investors for weekend fishing trips, lending it to important clients, even featuring it in a luxury reel. Estate magazine as evidence of his discerning eye for exceptional properties. The fact that I had found the listing, negotiated the purchase, and overseen every aspect of the renovation had, predictably, been omitted from the magazine article. The cabin had been presented as another example of Nathan Bennett's golden touch, his personal hideaway rather than our shared haven. As the ferry docked and we drove the winding roads to East Sound, I found myself unexpectedly emotional about this particular property. The cabin represented more than financial value. It embodied the gradual erosion of our personal connection, the transformation of shared dreams into Nathan's singular narrative. The cabin itself was a masterpiece of understated luxury. 3 bedrooms of cedar and glass perched on a rocky outcropping with panoramic views of the Sound. I'd worked with a local architect to preserve the original structure's charm while modernizing the interior and expanding the deck that cantilevered over the water. Beautiful place, Jason commented as we pulled into the gravel driveway. Very private. That was the idea, I replied, using my key to open the front door. The interior welcomed me with familiar scents of cedar and wood smoke, sparking memories of early mornings watching eagles from the deck, evenings spent reading by the stone fireplace, nights falling asleep to the gentle sound of waves against the rocks below. Had any of those moments been as genuine as I'd believed? Or had Nathan been mentally calculating how to leverage this property for business advantage even then? Jason's team worked efficiently, installing the new security system and rekeying the deadbolts. As they completed the technical aspects, I walked through each room, taking inventory of personal items I might want to retrieve later. My grandmother's quilt on the master bed, the collection of sea glass in a blue bowl on the kitchen windowsill, the watercolor of the view from our deck that I'd painted during a particularly peaceful weekend. These small treasures held no significant financial value, but they represented authentic pieces of myself that I'd integrated into our shared spaces. They weren't part of the Bennett brand or the carefully cultivated image Nathan projected. They were simply expressions of Alexandra, the woman who existed before and beyond Mrs. Bennett. By early afternoon, the cabin had been secured, and we headed back to the mainland for our next target, the lodge near Mount Baker. This property was Nathan's particular pride, a substantial timber structure with 6 bedrooms, situated on enough acreage to ensure privacy while maintaining easy access to ski areas. We'd purchased it 5 years ago from a tech executive facing financial difficulties, securing it well below market value. The lodge functioned as both personal vacation property and strategic business asset. We used it ourselves during ski season, but also offered it to select clients and business associates throughout the year. Nathan particularly enjoyed playing host here, presenting himself as the generous benefactor providing access to an exclusive retreat. The 3-hour drive from the ferry terminal to the lodge gave me time to check in with Rebecca Chen, updating her on the security changes and confirming our meeting scheduled for Monday morning. "Everything proceeding as planned?" she asked, her voice clear despite the intermittent cell service along the highway. "Exactly as planned," I confirmed. 4 properties secured yesterday, 2 more today, with the primary residence tomorrow. By Monday morning, I'll control access to everything. "Good," Rebecca approved. "And Nathan? Any suspicions?" "None," I said confidently. "He believes I'm spending the weekend at home, nursing my disappointment over our postponed anniversary celebration. Meanwhile, he's at Chatham Lodge with his executive assistant," Rebecca summarized, professional tone not quite masking her distaste. Men can be remarkably predictable in their deceptions. I couldn't disagree. There was something almost disappointing about the cliché Nathan had embraced. The successful businessman having an affair with his younger assistant, fabricating business trips to spend romantic weekends together. For someone who prided himself on innovation and original thinking in his professional life, his personal betrayal followed the most unimaginative script possible. The Mount Baker Lodge stood in a clearing surrounded by towering firs, its massive timbers and stone foundation giving it the appearance of growing organically from the landscape. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I noted with satisfaction that no other vehicles were present. Nathan occasionally lent the lodge to friends or associates without consulting me. Finding it empty simplified our task. Jason's team quickly set to work, following the same protocol they'd established at previous properties. While they implemented the security upgrades, I toured the lodge, cataloging its contents as I had at the island cabin. Here, the inventory had a different purpose. Unlike the cabin, which contained personal items of sentimental value, the lodge was furnished almost entirely with high-end pieces Nathan had selected to impress guests: designer furniture, original artwork, and luxury appointments that projected successful affluence. I photographed each room methodically, documenting the condition and contents. These weren't mementos I wanted to preserve. They were assets I needed to track. When the final accounting came, and it would come eventually, I wanted clear documentation of what existed before Nathan had any opportunity to remove or replace items. By early evening, the lodge had been secured with new electronic systems and rekeyed locks. As Jason's team packed their equipment, I stood on the back deck overlooking the forested valley below, feeling a curious mixture of melancholy and determination. This weekend was permanently altering the trajectory of my life, dismantling the structure I'd lived within for a decade. The process was necessary, but not without grief for what might have been, for the partnership I'd believed we were building. "Alexandra?" Jason called from the doorway. "We're ready to head back to Seattle. If you are?" I nodded, taking one last look at the view. "Yes, I'm ready." The drive back to Seattle was quieter, both Jason and I tired from the long day. As we approached the city, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Dinner with the development team. Running late. Amazing progress being made. How was your day?" The casual inquiry, laid atop what I knew was a complete fabrication, strengthened my resolve. Nathan wasn't just betraying our marriage with his affair. He was insulting my intelligence with these transparent lies, assuming I would accept whatever narrative he presented without question. "Just a quiet day at home," I replied, matching his deception with my own. "Enjoy your dinner." Back at our Madison Park home, I thanked Jason for the day's work and confirmed our meeting time for Sunday morning, the final and most significant phase of my security plan. "Tomorrow we secure your primary residence," he said, his tone conveying understanding of what this particular upgrade represented. "Are you certain you want to proceed with all the measures we discussed?" I met his gaze steadily. "Absolutely certain. 9 o'clock tomorrow." Alone in the house that night, I walked from room to room, seeing our shared space with new clarity. Like our other properties, this house had been carefully curated to project a specific image: successful, tasteful, affluent, but not ostentatious. Unlike the lodge or the downtown office, however, this was the space where we lived our daily lives, where the private reality of our relationship existed beyond public perception. In the kitchen, I traced my fingers along the marble countertops I'd selected, remembering how Nathan had initially questioned the expense, then later proudly pointed out his choice to dinner guests. In the living room, I studied the abstract painting centered above the fireplace, my find from a local gallery, now described in Nathan's dinner party anecdotes as something he'd discovered. Each room contained similar examples, elements I had chosen, contributions I had made, gradually appropriated into Nathan's narrative of singular vision. The physical space itself embodied the pattern that had defined our marriage. My ideas, efforts, and insights absorbed into his story, my distinct identity slowly subsumed into his brand. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of reclaiming that identity. By controlling access to our properties, I was doing more than securing physical assets. I was establishing boundaries, declaring independence, asserting my existence separate from Nathan Bennett's wife and business partner. I slept surprisingly well that night, waking before my alarm to sunshine streaming through the bedroom windows. A good omen, I decided, drawing back the curtains to reveal a rare, clear Seattle morning, the waters of Lake Washington glittering in the distance. Nathan texted just after 8. "Heading into morning sessions. Last day of conference. Should be home late tonight." I started to type an innocuous response, then stopped myself. What was the point of maintaining this charade when by evening, everything would have changed? Instead, I set the phone aside without replying and went to prepare for Jason's arrival. At precisely 9 o'clock, his vans pulled into our circular driveway. This final phase would be the most comprehensive, involving not just lock changes, but a complete overhaul of our home security system. New surveillance cameras, motion sensors, glass break detectors, and a central monitoring station that reported directly to my devices. "We'll start with the exterior access points," Jason explained as his team unloaded equipment. "Then move inward to interior rooms with valuable contents: your home office, the safe room, Nathan's study." I nodded, handing him a detailed floor plan I'd prepared. "I've marked priority areas. Pay particular attention to Nathan's study and the wine cellar. He keeps valuable collections in both." For the next several hours, I moved through the house, alongside Jason's team, authorizing access to secured areas and making decisions about protection levels for various spaces. The process was therapeutic in its methodical progression. Each new lock, each reprogrammed keypad, each surveillance camera representing another step towards security in both the literal and emotional sense. By mid-afternoon, the system upgrades were nearly complete. I sat at the kitchen island, reviewing the administrator controls on my tablet while Jason's team finished the final installations. "The system is fully operational," Jason confirmed, joining me with a comprehensive manual. "You now have exclusive administrator access to all security functions across all 7 properties. You can grant or revoke entry permissions remotely, view surveillance feeds from any location, and receive instant notifications of any access attempts." I scrolled through the application, testing various functions. And the mechanical locks? All rekeyed as requested. The new keys are here, he said, placing a small envelope on the counter. These are the only copies, apart from the emergency. Set in our secure vault that can only be accessed with your written authorization. The significance of what we'd accomplished settled over me. In 3 days, I had effectively taken control of every property in the Bennett portfolio, creating a security infrastructure that gave me complete oversight of our physical assets. Nathan, who had always positioned himself as the ultimate authority in our business and marriage, would soon discover that he couldn't enter his own home, office, or vacation properties without my permission. It wasn't about revenge, though I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction in the reversal of power. It was about establishing the leverage I needed for whatever came next. A negotiation where I wouldn't be dismissed or diminished. A conversation where my contributions would finally be acknowledged. "Thank you, Jason," I said, extending my hand, "for your expertise and your discretion." He shook it firmly. "You're welcome, Alexandra. If you need anything else, anything at all, please, don't hesitate to call directly, day or night." The emphasis wasn't subtle. Jason had worked with enough high-net-worth clients to recognize potential volatility when relationships fractured and significant assets were involved. "I appreciate that," I replied. "I don't anticipate any problems, but it's good to know I have support if needed." After Jason and his team departed, I spent the remaining hours of daylight preparing for Nathan's return. I selected my outfit carefully. Not the soft, accommodating wardrobe of Mrs. Bennett, corporate wife, but a sharper, more decisive ensemble that channeled the financial strategist I'd been before our marriage. I arranged documents on the dining room table, property deeds, business valuations, and the security system documentation that would make our new dynamic immediately clear. Evening approached, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. I checked the Chatham Lodge website, confirming checkout time was 11 a.m. Accounting for the drive from the Olympic Peninsula back to Seattle, Nathan would likely arrive between 6 and 7, assuming he didn't invent a reason to delay further. At 5:38 p.m., my phone chimed with a text from him. "Leaving Portland now. Traffic looks bad. Probably home around 8. Don't wait up if you're tired." Another casual lie. I wondered if he even reflected on how easily deception came to him now, how effectively he'd normalized it in our relationship. I didn't respond, instead opening the security app on my tablet. I wanted to be prepared for his arrival, to witness his first encounter with the consequences of my weekend activities. The house was quiet as darkness fell, the only sound the occasional gentle hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the entryway, a wedding gift from my parents that had marked the passing of our decade together in steady, relentless increments. At 7:42 p.m., a notification appeared on my tablet. Vehicle approaching main gate. I switched to the exterior camera feed, watching as Nathan's black Audi pulled into the driveway. He looked tired but satisfied as he emerged from the driver's seat, collecting his overnight bag from the trunk, the bag I knew contained nothing related to a Portland conference. I watched as he approached the front door, key in hand, confidence in his stride, the bearing of a man who has never questioned his right to occupy space, who has always expected doors to open at his approach. The moment his key met the lock, everything would change. Our marriage, our business partnership, our carefully constructed facade, all would be irreversibly altered by what was about to happen. Through the camera feed, I observed as Nathan inserted his key, then frowned when it failed to turn in the lock. He tried again, jiggling the key with increasing force, his expression shifting from confusion to frustration. After a third unsuccessful attempt, he reached for his phone. My own phone rang seconds later. Nathan's name and photo appeared on the screen, the professional headshot we'd used for company materials, showing him in his element. Confident, commanding, completely in control. How fitting that this image would accompany the call marking the end of that illusion. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello, Nathan." I took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Hello, Nathan. Rachel?" His voice held confusion tinged with irritation. "Something's wrong with the front door lock. My key isn't working." I sat at our dining room table, surrounded by the property documents I'd arranged earlier. "No, nothing's wrong with the lock. It's been changed." A pause. "Changed? Why would you change the locks without telling me?" "I've changed all the locks, Nathan, at every property." The silence that followed was profound. I could almost see him processing my words, his mind racing to understand their implications. "What are you talking about?" he finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "The house, the office downtown, Lake Union, Queen Anne, Ballard, the cabin on Orcas, the lodge at Mount Baker. Every property we own now has new security systems and locks. I'm the only administrator." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted from confusion to controlled anger. "Open the door, Rachel. We need to discuss this." "No," I replied calmly. "I don't think we do. Not tonight. How was Portland, by the way? Or should I ask how Chatham Lodge treated you and Jessica?" His sharp intake of breath told me everything. "Rachel, don't," I cut him off. "Don't insult me with more lies, Nathan. I know about Jessica. I know about your anniversary weekend plans. I've known for weeks." Through the security feed, I watched as he ran a hand through his hair, his composure slipping. "This is ridiculous. Let me in so we can talk about this like adults." "We are talking," I pointed out, "and I'd prefer to maintain this distance for now. It gives me clarity." "So this is what? Punishment? Some kind of power play?" His voice rose with indignation. "You can't just lock me out of my own properties." "Our properties," I corrected. "My name is on every deed, remember? For tax advantages. Your idea, actually. And this isn't a power play, Nathan. It's a reset. A recalibration of our relationship, personal and professional." He paced in front of the door, the security camera tracking his movements. "You've lost your mind. Do you have any idea how this looks? What this could do to our business reputation? If clients found out?" It was so perfectly Nathan. His first concern was appearance, not the marriage he'd betrayed or the trust he'd broken. "I'm not concerned with how it looks," I told him. "I'm concerned with what is. And what is, Nathan, is that you've been systematically undermining my contributions to our business while betraying our marriage with your secretary." "Executive assistant," he corrected automatically, then seemed to realize his error. "Look, you're upset. I understand that. But this, changing locks, locking me out, it's extreme. It's not like you." "That's where you're wrong," I replied. "This is exactly like me. The me that existed before I became Mrs. Nathan Bennett. The woman, with the financial acumen and strategic thinking that built half of what you claim as your achievement. I've just been suppressing her to accommodate your ego." He was silent again, likely weighing his options. Nathan was nothing if not tactical, always calculating the most advantageous approach. "Where am I supposed to go tonight?" He finally asked. "I'm sure Jessica would welcome you at her place," I suggested. "Or there's always the Four Seasons downtown. Either way, I need tonight to myself." "And tomorrow? Are you planning to keep me locked out of my own home indefinitely?" "Our home," I corrected again. "And no, not indefinitely. Just until we establish new parameters for our relationship going forward." "Parameters?" His laugh was harsh. "You make it sound like a business arrangement." "Isn't that what it's become?" I asked quietly. "A business arrangement where I contribute significantly but receive diminishing returns. Any good financial analyst would advise restructuring such an inequitable partnership. Through the camera, I watched him take a deep breath, visibly recalibrating his approach. "Rachel," he said, his voice softening to the persuasive tone he used with reluctant investors. "I understand you're hurt. We've had our issues like any couple. But this isn't the way to resolve them. Let me in, and we can talk about whatever's bothering you." The condescension in his voice, the assumption that I was acting from emotion rather than calculation, that my concerns could be dismissed as me being bothered, only reinforced my decision. "I'll meet you at Rebecca Chen's office tomorrow at 10, I said firmly. "She'll mediate our conversation about next steps." "Rebecca Chen? The divorce attorney?" His voice sharpened again. "You've already involved lawyers?" "Just one," I confirmed. "For perspective." Nathan's expression darkened. "I see. So this isn't about our marriage at all. You've already decided to end it." "No, Nathan. You decided to end it when you chose to spend our anniversary with Jessica. I'm simply acknowledging your decision and responding accordingly." He stared directly into the security camera, suddenly aware he was being observed. "You're making a mistake, Rachel. A serious one." "Perhaps," I conceded, "but it's my mistake to make. Something I haven't been allowed to do for a very long time." 10 o'clock, he said after a moment, his voice cold. "Chen's office. But this conversation is far from over." "Good night, Nathan." I ended the call and sat in the sudden silence of our home, feeling strangely light despite the confrontation. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth, without filtering it through consideration of Nathan's reaction. I had taken decisive action based on my own judgment, not seeking his approval or permission. Through the security feed, I watched as he stood motionless for a moment, then turned and walked back to his car. As his Audi disappeared down the driveway, I allowed myself a moment of quiet celebration. Phase 1 was complete. I had secured our properties and declared my independence. Phase 2 would begin tomorrow, when Nathan discovered just how thoroughly I had prepared for this conversation. Sleep came surprisingly easily that night. I woke feeling rested and focused, mentally preparing for the meeting ahead. I dressed, with care in a tailored navy suit I'd purchased recently without Nathan's input, a small but significant departure from the wardrobe he had subtly influenced over the years. Rebecca Chen's office occupied the 22nd floor of a downtown high-rise, offering sweeping views of Elliott Bay. Her reception area projected understated elegance, muted colors, comfortable seating, discreet privacy screens between waiting clients. It was designed to convey both competence and compassion, qualities that had made Rebecca one of Seattle's most sought-after divorce attorneys for high-net-worth clients. I arrived 15 minutes early, using the time to center myself and review key documents with Rebecca. "He'll likely be defensive initially," she advised as we sat in her private conference room. "Men like Nathan are unaccustomed to having their narratives challenged, especially by women they've successfully marginalized in the past." "I expect nothing less," I agreed. "But Nathan is ultimately pragmatic. Once he understands his options and their consequences, he'll make strategic choices rather than emotional ones." Rebecca nodded approvingly. "You know him well. That knowledge is an asset in these negotiations." At precisely 10 o'clock, her assistant announced Nathan's arrival. I straightened in my chair, conscious of my posture, my expression, the messages conveyed by my body language. This meeting would set the tone for everything that followed. Nathan entered the conference room looking immaculate in his charcoal gray suit. His power suit, the one he wore for important negotiations. His expression was composed, revealing nothing of last night's anger. Only the tightness around his eyes suggested he hadn't slept well. "Rachel," he nodded curtly, then extended his hand to Rebecca. "Ms. Chen, I must say this meeting comes as a surprise." Please sit, Mr. Bennett. Rebecca gestured to the chair across from me. We appreciate your promptness. Nathan sat, unbuttoning his jacket with practiced ease. I'm still unclear on the purpose of this. Intervention. My wife and I have had a misunderstanding, but nothing that requires legal mediation. This isn't an intervention, Nathan, I said calmly. It's a negotiation about our future, personal and professional. He turned his attention to me, studying my face with the evaluating gaze he used when considering property acquisitions. Based on what? Your suspicions? Your feelings? I opened the folder before me and removed a printout of the text message I'd seen on his iPad. Based on facts. Like this message from Jessica confirming your anniversary weekend at Chatham Lodge, while you told me you were at a conference in Portland. Nathan's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the armrest of his chair. One indiscretion doesn't justify changing locks on all our properties and excluding me from my own home. If it were one indiscretion, perhaps not, I conceded. But it's not about the affair, Nathan. It's about the pattern, the systematic way you've diminished my contributions to our business while benefiting from them. The affair is merely a symptom of a deeper problem. Rebecca interjected smoothly. Mr. Bennett, Alexandra has compiled extensive documentation of her contributions to Bennett Properties over the past decade, contributions that have been progressively obscured in company communications and public representations. She slid a thick folder across the table. Nathan didn't open it, his gaze remaining fixed on me. So this is about credit? He asked, incredulously. About who gets recognized for what? It's about equity, I corrected. About acknowledging reality rather than the narrative you've constructed. I haven't been your supportive wife who occasionally offers input. I've been an equal partner whose expertise and labor have directly contributed to our success. Nathan leaned back, a hint of his usual confidence returning. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, changing locks and hiring a divorce. Attorney seems like a disproportionate response to feeling underappreciated. Alexandra hasn't hired me for divorce proceedings, Rebecca clarified. She's consulted me about her options, which is both prudent and reasonable given the circumstances. Nathan's gaze shifted between us, reassessing the situation. Options for what, exactly? I took a deep breath. This was the crucial moment, laying out my terms clearly and confidently. I see 3 potential paths forward, I began. First, we could divorce. Given my documented contributions to Bennett Properties and the fact that most assets are in both our names, this would likely result in a 50-50 split at minimum. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Second, we could remain married but restructure our business relationship. I would take full control of certain properties, the Orcas Cabin, the Queen Anne and Ballard Rentals, and the Lake Union commercial building. You would retain the downtown office, the Mount Baker Lodge, and our primary residence. We would operate independently going forward. And the third option? Nathan asked quietly. We acknowledge what's happened, address the underlying issues, and rebuild both our marriage and our business partnership, but with significant changes. My contributions would be formally recognized. I would have equal decision-making authority, publicly acknowledged. And complete transparency would be required from both of us moving forward. The conference room fell silent as Nathan processed my proposal. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle continued its bustling pace, oblivious to the pivotal conversation unfolding 22 floors above street level. These aren't negotiations, Nathan finally said. They're ultimatums. They're starting points, I corrected. I'm open to discussion on the details, but the core principles are non-negotiable. I won't return to the previous dynamic. He studied me with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time the woman I had always been beneath the accommodating exterior I'd adopted during our marriage. And the locks? The security systems? That heavy-handed approach was necessary because Because it was the only way to ensure you would take this conversation seriously, I replied honestly. When was the last time you truly heard me, Nathan? Not just listened while formulating your response, but actually heard what I was saying? Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. You've made your point, he said finally. I'm listening now, but I'll need time to consider these options. Rebecca interjected smoothly. Of course. Meanwhile, Alexandra has prepared interim arrangements regarding property access and business operations. She handed Nathan another document, a temporary agreement I'd drafted with Rebecca's guidance, outlining limited access credentials for Nathan while we negotiated our path forward. You'll have access to the downtown office during business hours, I explained as he scanned the document. And a keycard for the Mount Baker Lodge, which I know you need for the client retreat next weekend. But our primary residence remains restricted for now. You're asking me to sign away my right to enter my own home, he observed, his tone carefully neutral. I'm asking for space, I countered. Physical and emotional. I think I've earned that much. Nathan studied me again, calculation evident in his gaze. He was weighing options, assessing leverage points, searching for advantages, the same mental process he applied to business negotiations. The Four Seasons has excellent suites, I added. Consider it a cooling-off period while we both reflect on what we want going forward. After a long moment, Nathan picked up the pen Rebecca had provided and signed the interim agreement. 1 week, he stipulated. I'll give you your space for 1 week while I consider your proposals. Then we meet again, here, and discuss concrete terms. Agreed, I said, feeling a curious mixture of victory and sadness. This wasn't how I had imagined our 10th anniversary unfolding, yet there was something appropriate about marking the milestone with truth rather than illusion. As Nathan rose to leave, he paused, uncertainty briefly replacing his usual confident demeanor. For what it's worth, he said quietly, the affair with Jessica. It wasn't about you. It wasn't because you were lacking in any way. I know, I replied simply. It was about you, your choices, your priorities. Just like this response is about me. My choices, my priorities. He nodded once, accepting the truth of my words, then turned and left the conference room. Rebecca waited until the door closed before speaking. That went better than expected. He's rattled but calculating. He'll spend the next week figuring out which option costs him least, financially and reputationally. Yes, I agreed, gathering my documents. Nathan will always make the strategically advantageous choice. The question is whether he's capable of recognizing that saving our marriage might actually be that choice. Are you hoping for reconciliation? Rebecca asked carefully. After everything? I considered the question seriously. I'm hoping for resolution that honors my worth, in whichever form that takes. If Nathan can truly see me as an equal partner, acknowledge my contributions, and commit to transparency going forward, perhaps. But I won't compromise on those elements, even to preserve our marriage. Good, she approved. Clarity about your non-negotiables is crucial. Keep that focus during the coming week, regardless of whatever pressure tactics he might employ. I left Rebecca's office feeling oddly light, despite the weightiness of the morning's conversation. For 10 years, I had gradually diminished myself to accommodate Nathan's expanding ego. Now, I had reclaimed my voice, my agency, my right to equal standing in our relationship. Whatever happened next, that reclamation was permanent. The week passed with surprising tranquility. I had expected Nathan to employ various tactics, charm, pressure, perhaps manipulation through mutual friends. But instead, he maintained a respectful distance, communicating only about necessary business, matters through brief professional emails. On the 5th day, A package arrived from his attorney. Not divorce papers as I might have anticipated, but a comprehensive proposal for restructuring Bennett Properties with formal acknowledgement of my equal partnership and contributions dating back to the company's founding. The documents included public recognition protocols, equal profit distribution, and joint decision-making requirements for all major initiatives. A handwritten note accompanied the legal paperwork. This is independent of our personal situation. Your contributions deserve recognition regardless of what happens between us. The gesture was unexpectedly thoughtful. Acknowledgement without contingency, professional respect, separate from personal reconciliation. It suggested Nathan was actually considering my points rather than simply calculating the most advantageous counterstrategy. The following day, I received a text from him. Would you be willing to meet before our scheduled appointment? Perhaps coffee at Westlake Park tomorrow? I considered declining. Our agreement had specified a week of separation, a clean break to gain perspective. But curiosity won out. What had prompted this request for early contact? 3 p.m., I replied. I'll have an hour before my meeting with the Lake Union Tenants Association. Westlake Park was neutral territory, a public space downtown where neither of us held any particular advantage or association. I arrived deliberately early, selecting a table with clear sightlines and multiple exit routes. A strategic choice. That would have amused the old me, but now felt simply prudent. Nathan arrived precisely at 3, without his usual commanding entrance. He moved differently somehow, less expansive in his occupation of space, more conscious of his surroundings. He spotted me immediately, but approached with uncharacteristic hesitation. Thank you for meeting me, he said, remaining standing until I gestured toward the chair opposite mine. I appreciate your flexibility. What prompted this request? I asked, bypassing small talk. Our scheduled meeting is still 2 days away. Nathan set down the leather portfolio he carried, arranging it carefully before responding. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our meeting with Rebecca. About us, about Bennett Properties, about the patterns we've established. And, I prompted when he paused, and I realized I don't need a full week to know what I want. He met my gaze directly. I want option 3, rebuilding our partnership, personal and professional. But I understand that requires fundamental changes, not superficial adjustments. I studied him skeptically. That's a quick resolution for someone who built a career on careful deliberation. Not quick, he corrected. Overdue. The evidence you presented was compelling, Rachel. Not just the affair, which is indefensible, but the systematic pattern of diminishing your contributions while benefiting from them. I've been reviewing company communications, press mentions, client presentations. Your narrative, I interjected. Yes, he acknowledged without defensiveness. My carefully constructed narrative that gradually erased your role. It's all there in black and white once I actually looked for it. His candor was surprising. Nathan typically excelled at justifications and deflections, rarely conceding points that diminished his position. Why the urgency to meet? I asked. This could have waited until our scheduled appointment. Nathan opened his portfolio and removed a newspaper folded to display a specific article. He slid it across the table without comment. The headline announced, Bennett Properties Restructures Leadership, Alexandra Bennett, named co-CEO. I looked up sharply. You issued a press release? Without consulting me? No, he said quickly. I drafted a release but haven't submitted it. This is a mock-up from our media team, showing how it would appear. I wouldn't take that step without your approval. I scanned the article, noting the prominent acknowledgement of my essential contributions to the company's founding and growth, and the formal recognition of my equal partnership in all aspects of the business since its inception. This is comprehensive, I observed, continuing to read. It should be, Nathan replied. It's the truth. One I should have acknowledged years ago. I set the paper down, studying him with renewed attention. There was something different in his demeanor, a quality I couldn't immediately identify until I realized what was missing, the calculating edge that typically accompanied his interactions, the constant assessment of advantage and position. "Why now?" I asked. "What changed?" Nathan considered the question carefully. Being locked out of our properties was illuminating, not just practically, but symbolically. For the first time, I experienced what it must feel like to be excluded from something you helped build, to have your access and authority suddenly revoked. A wry smile briefly touched his lips. It was a perfect metaphor, Rachel, one even I couldn't miss. Despite myself, I appreciated the insight. The security changes had indeed been both practical protection and symbolic statement. "The press release is just the beginning," he continued. "I've drafted a complete restructuring of Bennett Properties that formalizes your equal leadership role, retroactively acknowledges your contributions to every acquisition and development, and establishes protocols to ensure ongoing equitable recognition." He removed another document from his portfolio, a comprehensive business proposal with sticky notes marking key provisions. I accepted it, but didn't open it immediately. "And personally?" I asked, meeting his gaze directly. "What are you proposing for our marriage?" Nathan's expression shifted, becoming more vulnerable than I'd seen in years. "Whatever you want, Rachel. If you need separation or divorce, I'll accept that and ensure you receive everything you're entitled to, professionally and financially. If you're willing to attempt reconciliation, I'm committed to rebuilding with complete transparency and equal partnership." "Those sound like carefully considered options," I observed. "Very balanced, very rational." "They're not options I'm offering as negotiating positions," he countered. "They're acknowledgments of your autonomy. You get to decide what happens next, based on what you want, not what's convenient or advantageous for me." The statement was so unlike Nathan, who had always approached our relationship as something to be managed for optimal outcomes, that I found myself momentarily speechless. "I don't expect an immediate answer," he continued into the silence. "I just wanted you to have this information before our scheduled meeting, to give you time to consider it without pressure." I studied him, searching for the calculated performance I'd grown accustomed to during our marriage. What I found instead was something I hadn't seen in years: genuine presence, attention unmarred by the constant calculation of advantage. "I'll review this," I said finally, indicating the proposal. "But I'll need more than 2 days to make decisions about our personal relationship." "Of course," Nathan agreed immediately. "Take whatever time you need. The business restructuring can proceed independently. Your professional recognition shouldn't be contingent on personal reconciliation." As we prepared to leave, Nathan hesitated. "There's one more thing." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small USB drive, which he placed carefully on the table. "This contains all my communications with Jessica, dating back to when she was hired. Emails, texts, everything. Not edited, not curated. I've also included my personal journal from the past week, documenting my thought process as I've worked through what happened between us." The gesture was unprecedented. Nathan had always guarded his privacy zealously, particularly regarding his personal reflections. "Why would you share that?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because rebuilding trust requires radical transparency," he replied simply. "And because you deserve to know exactly what you're forgiving, if you choose to forgive." I picked up the drive, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected vulnerability. "Thank you for meeting me," Nathan said, closing his portfolio. "I'll see you at Rebecca's office as scheduled, unless you'd prefer to cancel that appointment in light of this conversation." "No," I decided. "Let's keep it. I'll need Rebecca's perspective on the business restructuring if nothing else. He nodded, accepting my decision without question. Until then. As I watched him walk away, I felt a curious mixture of emotions. The man who had just left seemed fundamentally different from the husband I'd confronted just days earlier. More self-aware, more respectful of boundaries, more willing to acknowledge his failings without defensiveness. Was this transformation genuine or simply another strategy to regain control of the situation? Only time would tell. The following 2 days gave me space to review Nathan's proposals with cold-eyed analysis. The business restructuring was impressively thorough, addressing not just formal leadership titles, but subtler aspects of recognition and credit. He had anticipated potential issues I might raise, including provisions for independent decision-making authority in areas where our expertise differed. More surprising was the content of the USB drive. Nathan's communications with Jessica revealed exactly what I had suspected: a gradual progression from professional interaction to increasingly personal connection, with him initiating the boundary crossings while maintaining plausible deniability. His journal entries from the past week showed unexpected self-awareness, acknowledging patterns of behavior that extended beyond our marriage into his broader professional relationships. By the time our scheduled meeting with Rebecca arrived, I had reached several conclusions. The business restructuring would proceed immediately. It was fair, comprehensive, and long overdue. Our personal relationship required more careful consideration. I wasn't ready to recommit to our marriage, but neither was I prepared to end it definitively. Rebecca's conference room looked exactly as it had a week earlier, yet everything felt different. I arrived early, as was my habit, but this time Nathan was already there, engaged in quiet conversation with Rebecca. They both stood as I entered. "Alexandra," Nathan greeted me, using my full name rather than the diminutive Alex he had adopted years ago despite my preference. The small acknowledgement didn't go unnoticed. "Nathan," I replied, taking my seat across from him, "I've reviewed your proposals." Rebecca interjected smoothly. "Before we begin, I want to clarify that my role today is to facilitate discussion and provide legal perspective, not to advocate for either party's position." We both nodded our understanding. "The business restructuring is acceptable," I began, addressing Nathan directly, "with minor amendments that Rebecca can oversee. I'd like to implement those changes immediately, regardless of what happens with our personal relationship." "Agreed," Nathan said without hesitation. "I've already instructed our corporate counsel to prioritize the revisions once you've approved them." "As for our marriage," I continued, choosing my words carefully, "I'm not prepared to make a final decision today. I need more time, more evidence of sustained change rather than immediate reaction to crisis." Nathan nodded, accepting this without visible disappointment. "What would that look like? The time and evidence you need?" It was a fair question, one I had considered extensively during the past 2 days. 3 months of separation, I proposed. "You'll maintain residence elsewhere while we implement the business restructuring and begin working together professionally under the new arrangement. We'll have weekly conversations, not about business, but about ourselves and our relationship. And we'll both commit to individual therapy, with the option for couples counseling if we both feel it would be beneficial after the initial separation. Period." Rebecca made notes as I outlined these terms. "This would be a structured separation rather than a legal separation," she clarified. "The purpose being to evaluate potential reconciliation rather than transition toward divorce." "Yes," I confirmed, then looked to Nathan. "Unless you prefer a different arrangement?" He shook his head. "No, your proposal is reasonable. More than reasonable given the circumstances. I just have one question." "Which is?" "The properties," he said. "The security systems, the access restrictions. Where do those stand during this separation period?" It was a practical question with symbolic implications. My control of our shared properties had initiated this confrontation. How we handled access moving forward would reflect the evolving power dynamic between us. I proposed joint administration, I decided. Equal access to all properties except our primary residence, which remains my domain during the separation. You'll have scheduled visits with advance notice, but not unrestricted access. Nathan considered this, then nodded his acceptance. I can work with that arrangement. The meeting proceeded with surprising efficiency, addressing practical matters like public statements about the business restructuring, temporary financial arrangements during our separation, and protocols for our continued professional interaction. Throughout the discussion, Nathan remained attentive and accommodating, offering reasonable compromises when points of disagreement arose. As we prepared to conclude, Rebecca asked, "Is there anything else either of you would like to address before we formalize these agreements?" Nathan hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Just one thing. I want to apologize, Rachel. Not as a negotiating tactic or to win favor, but because it needs to be said. I've been systematically diminishing your contributions and rewriting our history to center myself. I've taken your support for granted while failing to acknowledge your essential role in everything we've built. And I betrayed your trust in the, most fundamental way possible." He met my gaze directly, without the practiced charm he typically employed in difficult conversations. "I can't undo any of that. I can only acknowledge it honestly and commit to being different moving forward, whether we remain married or not." The simple sincerity of his apology caught me off guard. Nathan had always excelled at strategic expressions of regret, carefully calibrated to diffuse tension without accepting meaningful responsibility. This felt different, unpolished, uncomfortable, genuine. "Thank you," I said after a moment. "I appreciate the acknowledgement." As we signed the interim agreements Rebecca had prepared, I found myself contemplating the path ahead. The business restructuring would proceed immediately, giving me the professional recognition I had earned years ago. The personal reconciliation remained uncertain, dependent on Nathan's ability to sustain meaningful change and my own willingness to rebuild trust after profound betrayal. What was certain, however, was that I would never return to the previous dynamic. I had reclaimed my power, my voice, my rightful place in our shared endeavors. Whatever shape our relationship took moving forward, it would be founded on genuine equity rather than performative partnership. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of our Orcas Island cabin, watching sunlight glitter across the sound. Transformation in my life since that anniversary weekend had been profound, not just in my relationship with Nathan, which remained in careful reconstruction, but in my sense of self. Bennett Properties had publicly announced our co-leadership structure, with extensive media coverage highlighting my previously unacknowledged contributions to the company's success. Initial client reactions had been overwhelmingly positive, with several commenting that they had always worked more closely with me anyway and welcomed the formal recognition of my role. Nathan had maintained his separate residence throughout our separation period, respecting boundaries with meticulous care. Our weekly conversations had gradually deepened from cautious formality to genuine exchange, revealing aspects of ourselves that had been submerged during our marriage. His individual therapy seemed to be yielding meaningful insights, which he shared without expectation or pressure. Most significantly, I had rediscovered myself beyond the roles of wife and business partner. I had reconnected with former colleagues, renewed abandoned interests, and begun exploring possibilities that had nothing to do with Bennett Properties or my marriage. For the first time in a decade, I was making choices based solely on my own desires rather than their impact on Nathan or our shared enterprises. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted my reflection. Nathan appeared at the edge of the deck, maintaining a respectful distance until I acknowledged him with a nod. "The ferry was delayed," he explained, setting down his overnight bag. "Beautiful evening." "It is," I agreed, turning back to the view. He moved to stand beside me at the railing, careful to leave space between us. "How are you?" "Good," I said, realizing the response wasn't merely polite, but genuine. Centered. Clear. Nathan nodded, accepting this without probing. We stood in companionable silence as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. "Our 3 months end next week," he observed eventually, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes," I acknowledged. "They do." "Have you reached any conclusions?" he asked. "About us?" I turned to study him. This man I had loved, resented, confronted, and now viewed with new eyes. The man who had taken me for granted, betrayed my trust, and then demonstrated an unexpected capacity for growth and accountability. "I have," I said quietly. "I've decided that our marriage deserves another chance. Not as it was, but as it could be. Equal partnership in reality, not just in name. Complete transparency. Mutual respect for boundaries and aspirations." Relief washed over his features, quickly tempered with restraint. "I want that too, more than anything." "It won't be easy," I cautioned. "Patterns don't change overnight. We'll both slip into old habits. We'll need to call each other out, to maintain vigilance against the dynamics that brought us here." "I know," he agreed soberly. "I'm prepared for that work, for however long it takes." I nodded, turning back to the sunset. "Then we begin, again, not from scratch, but from truth." As daylight faded into dusk, we remained side by side on the deck of the cabin that had once been merely another asset in Nathan's portfolio, but now represented something different, a space of possibility, of honesty, of new beginnings founded on clear-eyed recognition rather than convenient illusion. I had changed the locks on everything Nathan loved, and in doing so, had unlocked something essential within myself. A strength and clarity I would never again surrender, regardless of what the future held for our reconstructed marriage. Inside, the security system blinked its steady green light, armed and functioning, but now responsive to both our commands. A fitting metaphor for the relationship we were carefully rebuilding, protected but accessible, secure but not restricted, shared rather than controlled. Whatever came next, the woman I had reclaimed would remain, seen, acknowledged, empowered. Not defined by her marriage or her business success, but by her own choices and her willingness to stand firmly in her worth, even when it meant changing the locks on everything she had helped build. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.